here in our story, or it's here. We've also been sharing our story with the community through the annual Echoes of LBI publication in June and in the Sandpaper in July. And we've been sharing history shorts during the month of August at both services here at church. So for those of you who haven't been a part of it, we're kind of ahead of you, and it is a lot to digest. And the focus of our stories today, it's also a lot to capture. So we'll be sharing a variety of stories today that cover the span of 100 years. And we'll be told, there'll be a bit deeper dive. These are more personal stories. And I want you to know that there are so many rich, rich stories, too many to tell. So by sharing some of these deeper dives, and then when we move for lunch into the other room, over there you'll see that there are story shorts on each of the tables. And I encourage you when we move over there to read them, to share them. Just be careful when you pick them up. If you turn them over, the papers might slide out. But they're taped together at the bottom, so there's a set of two. And so just please share them. And the other stories that I want you to share are the stories of your own, because you're all a part of our story. And it's an important story to tell. So with that, I'd like to go introduce our first speaker. 100 years ago, our local fire department, our church, and our town shared much of the same DNA. We also shared the same train station across the way. We all occupied it for a time. And so I'd like to introduce to you Ship Bottom's mayor, Bill Huelsenbeck. His wife Marty, as mentioned earlier, is a member of our church. And Bill grew up on LBI since the 3rd grade in the school here, and he served in the town since the early 70s, in his early 20s he was, and has been mayor, is it 25 years now?
Yeah, close.
Yeah, close. So he's got a longer tenure than you, Dan. So, Bill? Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. On behalf of the town of Ship Bottom, I want to wish Grace Calvary wonderful, happy celebration of your 100th year.
Right to your chin, please.
Closer. You know, it's funny how words can come true sometimes. I would meet Pastor Dan in Home Depot or something like that, and he used to say to me, "I'm going to get you in my church if it's the last thing." Evidently, they'll give you credit for Christmas and Easter. But Pastor Dan, I want to thank you too for the wonderful work you did in Ship Bottom. We've been friends a long time. I will never forget the work that you and your congregation did for during Sandy. It was incredible. In the fire truck. That was a joyful day.
Yeah, I felt like a politician.
And I want to thank Linda because she's put a lot of work in the history of this church. Now, I thought I knew where every pipe and electric appliance and things in the town were, but I found out in the last week that there's a lot of things I didn't know. And I will never look at this church in the way I used to, as to what happened in the history of this town. Now, these things I'm going to tell you come 100% from Linda. There's a little things in there, if I knew certain people, I'll tell you, but she did a fabulous job. you will find out that the church here had a major role in our town of Shipbottom. After some years of planning, back to probably 1916 for the church, in September of 1924, the church was completed. And it would have been a fine addition to any town. They would be proud of that. Except there wasn't a town. Shipbottom was not a town. We were divided into neighborhoods. There was Bonnie Beach, Bonnet Beach, Edgewater Beach, which I know was on Joe Klopp Street, Beach Arlington, and Shipbottom. There was a fire company, there was a waterworks, but there was no government, there was no town. So the church went on, and I'm looking at the people in the church and what they did, the elders, people that were officers of the church. And because Linda did her history not only from the church, but from the perspective of the town back. And when you look at the names of the people who started our town, and you look at the people that were in the church, they're the same people. Now, there's other denominations, other people that did help in between, but this church dominated the founding of Shipbottom. There's a lot of people that, when I was younger, they were in their twilight, so I did have some interaction with those people and knew them. So it wasn't a town wanting a church, it was a church searching for a town, you see. And then, as I was looking through it, I even called Linda last night because I was so excited that I got to thinking how next year we're going to have our 100th birthday in Shipbottom. And we were incorporated, just think about this, in March of 1925. The church was built in September. 6 to 8 months later, there's a town meeting with a government, with people, assessors, the whole thing. So that's what I said to them, how could that happen? Only thinking in my head, how would it happen? Of course, she had the answer. You see, the people in the church always had a vision. They had faith and they had a vision. That all started back in 1916. And as they went through, they got the congregation, the people who had faith, they solved all of God's problems, and then they went on to work to build the town. So we were incorporated in March, and they had a mayor, and they had councilmen, and they had 4 people from the church that were in the first lineup of people in government. And like I said, the names are here. I think Linda's going to put this out.
And it's actually on the slide behind you.
Oh, okay, very good. So the first people in the government, one of them was John Farrow, and John was on the town council from the 1925 to the 50s, about as long as I was. Yeah. Church deacon and trustee till 1950, and his wife Beulah was a trustee from the 40s to 50s. Art Downer was a mason. He lived on 18th Street in the Ocean, and of course he had a brick house. And looking through the eyes of a young person, someone said Art Downer, you thought of Halloween. Now on Halloween, when you went to Art's house, they had a big fishbowl full of peanuts. And you could walk over and not look, or put your hand and get as many peanuts as you want and put them in your bag. Now, peanuts are not a candy bar. But Art and his wife would roll up dollars in paper and a $5 bill and put them in the peanuts. So you couldn't look, but you hoped that when you got home, in those peanuts was $1 or a $5 bill. Art always made you take your mask off before you leave. And, people would think that, well, he knew your dad or your mom or your family wanted to know about that. We always thought that he didn't want us to go home and get another mask. There was Joe Bailey. He had Bailey's boatyard over on 23rd Street where the peninsula goes out, and his house was to the north of that. And I lived on 23rd Street when we first moved here, and you could smell the red lead paint, which is illegal now, and the caulking, because most of the boats were wooden. Fiberglass pretty much wasn't around at that point in time. But you can always go down there and make 50 cents or somebody needed some scraping done or something like that. So when you were younger, you always had a job. Oliver Cox and Charles Cox from the Cox and Cox family, who actually built most of the roads right next to Joe Pop's. They had a big area with equipment, a hay barn, and you might wonder what the hay barn was for. And this is where I would say what I knew about Cox and Cox when I was a kid. When they brought the gravel from Cox's pit and they were going to build the road or something, if they put the gravel on the sand, it wouldn't be long before the gravel would permeate through the sand, and it would be, as soon as you rode over it, it would just, you could sink. So on the marshes out here, they had salt hay. They would mow the salt hay just like they would for a farm or somewhere. And salt hay is resistant to rot, and it packs real tight. So they would take the road and they would scrape it in the sand, and then they would put a layer of straw down, of the salt hay, and then they would put the gravel back on top of that, and they would make a road. Well, as kids, there would be salt hay bales all around with different jobs and stuff, and they were kind of easy for two people to move. And we used to make forts out of it. You can make it. So when they got there, they were stacked nice. And we usually had a cave going through there. When they got back, they had to go pick them up. But things that I remember from the people that were from this church, not knowing at the time the good work that they were doing, and all the way through the number of years until the 80s and probably beyond. This church was, the people in this church were in the town. They were trustees, they were things, and they were mayors. Frank Klein, I remember him. He had High Vita Milk Company, which was just south of Hostrockers Marina. And I remember Sarah Holt had the Amoco station, and how these people kind of worked together. Everything was closed. We had Island Supermarket, and we had McGee's. So if it was Sunday night and Mom said, uh-oh, we don't have any milk for cereal tomorrow, you were lost, you were done. So High Vita worked with Sarah over the Amoco station and put a milk machine in. So you would put a quarter and a penny in, and the milk would come up. He would get a quart of milk. And it's not a Wawa, but it worked. But I know my time's up, but there's so many people from this church, and if you just read this, and you'll start reading between the lines how a church built a town. Thank you.